Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Hello and welcome back, Brewer fans, to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. I am your host, Vince Trovato, and I am joined here on the set tonight with the one and only Mr. Scott Bartell. Scott, how are you today?
Doing great. Trying to stay positive. Hopefully will this Brewer team to playoff berth. You know, just the usual.
I'm sure that the Brewers appreciate all of your efforts and your general optimism about this crew. Scott, you talked to Craig. Is he joining us tonight here on the set?
Craig is not. I'm not sure what he's doing. It's possible that the allure of Lambeau Field has been sort of a siren song to him, and he's going to be staying up there for a while and just,
all right.
Sink in, the rich history of all the championships and stuff,
That's great. That's really great. Okay, and then Chad Collins, are you on the set here today? You called in? Chad is not called in. Okay.
I think Chad's at the library.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right. Chad had some research to do, I'm guessing. Okay, well, fair enough. Well, Scott, I guess it's just you and me.
No,
here
the
on
library
the set
is a strip club here in Las Vegas. I'm sorry.
I
should have probably clarified. But yes,
and so I repeat,
other.
Chad has some research to do. Very good. Okay.
Either way, yes.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I guess it's just you and me, Scott. Well, let's talk some Brewers baseball. The Brewers are one of several contending teams, of course, in the National League, and as such, there have been a number of rumors associated with the Brewers as the trade deadline approaches. For fans who are not aware, just to recap very quickly, the trading deadline, the non-waivers trading deadline for Major League Baseball is set for July 31st, meaning that any trade that teams make before the 31st can be done without any other teams having a say at all. So most general managers are looking to add significant pieces to their rosters by the 31st if they are in contention for a playoff position. So, Scott, looking at the deadline here for the Brewers, we've talked about it briefly on other episodes. Where do you think that David Stearns is looking to make a move? Is he looking to make a move? And do you have any names that might be wearing a Brewers uniform here as baseball starts in August?
Well, let's see. Cleveland traded their catching prospect, Mejia. I hope I'm saying that right. Mejia.
Yep.
Hopefully one of the two is right. He was the guy that we traded, Lucroy for back in the day, but Lucroy nixed that trade. He uses no trade clause.
Right.
But Mejia's he's still been a guy that's been on the Brewers' radar, and we could, of course, always use help at catcher. Unfortunately, he was just traded by Cleveland to the San Diego Padres for Brad Hand. And so he's off the market. Rumors are that we're asking the Twins about both Dozier and Escobar, second and short, respectively. So there's a chance that could happen. And even though Machado is out, being traded now to the Dodgers. I'm sure Brewer fans are quite familiar with him at this point with all the games we've played against the Dodgers. Having said that, we're still talking with the Orioles a little bit, kicking the tires on, their closer Brinson, and then what else do we got?
Jonathan Shoup, their second baseman, I know had been mentioned before as well. And he would be a piece to add up the middle. I know that a lot of Brewer fans we're hoping that the Brewers would pull the trigger on Manny Machado. Machado was traded, right after the All-Star game to the Dodgers, as you pointed out, Scott, as I'm sure most fans are aware of by this point. But it was said that the Brewers were probably the second finalist for Machado's services, and Machado is a rental. So, if the Brewers were to have acquired him, it would have been just, the only guaranteed time would have been for the remainder of the 2018 season. And, I think that David Stearns is probably reluctant to part with any of our top few prospects for a rental. I just think that kind of goes against the philosophy that Stearns has shown in his several years now as Brewers general manager. And it looks, the final trade between the Orioles and the Dodgers sent 5 minor league prospects back to the Dodgers. And it's very rare that you see, 5-for-1 swaps, especially for a rental. So I found that to be kind of interesting. It looks like the Orioles got more quantity than quality in that trade, but it's obviously it's hard to project prospects, and time will tell on what value the Orioles actually received back for their best player for the past 7 years. So it was a very, very interesting trade, and I know that a lot of Brewer fans were disappointed that we didn't get Machado.
Yep, still talking to the Orioles about let's see, Zach Britton now, Shoop, like you mentioned, even Kevin Gausman, Dylan Bundy, all names being thrown around a little bit.
Well, let's get right into some fan email here. We did get a question. Actually, this one was on Twitter, posed to us by Vikram Paragankar, who is a loyal, longtime Brew Review fan in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And he asked, now with Machado off the market, is there anyone out there that is a better fit for this Brewers team to be targeting? And you throw out some names, Scott, but is there anybody that really stands out, not just as a possibility, but who would be an upgrade, a significant upgrade, somebody that is available and we have a chance of acquiring? And one name I'll throw out briefly is Asdrubal Cabrera from the New York Mets. I think that he'd be available, and I think he'd be relatively cheap. Do you see Cabrera or Dozier or any other names as being significant pieces that we could pull in lieu of losing out on the Manny Machado sweepstakes?
Well, I'll say this. We've been slapping Band-Aid after Band-Aid on second base this year, and shortstop for that matter, and we have not found the answer. I mean, Saladino's been the closest thing to the answer. VR hasn't been terrible, but maybe. But I don't know.
Well, and just to interrupt you really quick, too, VR is currently on the disabled list. So just add him to a long list of Brewers that have spent time on the DL this year. So even a healthy VR, who I think is, batting 262 as of this taping, isn't necessarily an option. We're not sure how long he's going to be out. So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's rough. I don't know. I guess Whit Merrifield's another option from Kansas City that could play second for us. But if you're asking, are any of these guys going to be up? Are they going to be able to make as big of a difference as Manny Machado? The answer is no. I don't know that there's a bat out there. I think the closest bat, maybe just because of the position alone, would be JT Realmuto.
Miami Marlins catcher.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily see another Machado out there. If you're going to make any kind of a difference, it would be with our starting rotation. Our rotation is done so well considering. But I really do think that this team needs a starter that can consistently work into the 7th inning, and we don't have that in any way. And I think it's a little bit taxing on the bullpen. And as the bullpen starts to get a little bit worn down right now, we've done a good job of, revolving the back end of the bullpen with Woodruff and Hauser and Lopez, things like that. But I think it's starting to crack, and I think we might need a starter that's going to be able to go deeper in those games. If you're looking for an impact starter, Cole Hamels is still the one that I want us to get. He's signed through the end of next year, so he would be a little bit of controllable talent. But I don't know. He's expensive, but because of that, maybe you wouldn't have to give up that much to get him. Other than that, I mean, unless the Mets want to part with DeGrom or Syndergaard, that's going to cost us a lot. Archer is still being thrown out there a little bit. I don't really have him.
Yeah, to your point, Scott, about the starting rotation. Yeah, they've been able to put up some consistent numbers, but boy, it has been just an injury merry-go-round all season. It seems like, and the Brewers are expecting that Junior Guerra is now going to be healthy, but, he's just been activated this week. But then we lose Brent Suter, and he goes on the disabled list after suffering another forearm injury in the, last Sunday's game against the Dodgers. So it just seems like we can't get ahead with our depth in the rotation at this point. We're really having to utilize just about everybody. Aaron Wilkerson even had to make a spot start within the last couple of weeks. And, boy, it really would be nice to add another arm to that rotation. I'm going to disagree with you and with I know Craig. Yeah, I know. And I know with Craig, who can't make it today because it was well for the Packers. But I am not under the impression that Cole Hamels will be a huge difference maker. He's put up a 4+ ERA this year. He's not really much better, it seems to me, than the options that we have. He's really expensive, which doesn't seem like a Stearns move. And yeah, that means less giving up in terms of prospects. But don't forget, we got this huge crunch coming up with the 40-man over the winter that we're going to have to expose a bunch of guys to waivers in a Rule 5 draft. And I think that those would be the types of players we would be expending for a guy like Hamels. So I don't really look at the cost as being crazy. So I don't know if the financial incentive is there to do it, or making a trade incentive is there to do it just based on the financials. And I think that finally that Hamels has a no trade clause, which he would have to waive to come to the Brewers. And he is under team control for next season, but it's not guaranteed a team would have to pick up that option year. And I don't think that Hamels waived his no trade clause unless the Brewers are willing to pick that up, which is going to be about $20 million, I believe. And to put 20, that, 22, and to put that on us on next year's team financially, I just don't know that Stearns is going to want to handicap, the Brewers next year with that very hefty salary for, in my opinion, and you guys will disagree with me on this, but a very middle of the road starter at this point in time. And even his durability, which has been pointed to as being one of the major assets that Hamels can bring to the table, is, I think, up for question because he has had his injuries the last couple of years, and not so much this season, but in a few of the past seasons. And I just don't think that the price is going to be worth it purely from a financial point of view on a guy like Hamels.
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, I mean, you made a lot of really good points there. Not only that, but like you said, Cole Hamels is old. I don't know how old he is. I know he's old. So, obviously, the older you get, the more injury prone.
I think he's 34, about to be 35. So, you're talking a 35 to 36 season next year. And, I just don't know if paying a guy $20 million is wise, considering you could probably go get another guy of that ilk in free agency for significantly reduced price on that $20 million and put that money elsewhere. But hey, that's just me. If you think that he is going to be the guy that really jumpstarts the rotation, then you do it because they're still in contention. And I think Craig has rightfully pointed out that a guy like Hamels in the postseason could be a difference maker, perhaps. But actually, his postseason numbers are not that great. You'd hope that he would have learned something just because he would have had the experience, and that would be an upgrade over some of our younger players. But you don't really know based on his track record in the postseason. So interesting thoughts. I don't know that DeGrom or Syndergaard are going to be available. There may be some other buy low starting pitchers that have had some success in the past but are not having as successful seasons this year. Perhaps, and I'll throw out a couple names. Number one, that Craig would really like, which is Sonny Gray from the Yankees. I don't necessarily think that the Yankees are going to be looking to unload starting pitching during the year this year, so that may be a non-starter. But I don't dislike Gray. I was not in favor of acquiring him last season because I think that he was highly overrated on the trade market. But if you can buy low on him, then perhaps that's a deal that the Brewers could look at. I do think he's a middle of the rotation guy. I don't think he is an ace by any stretch. I think he's having a very awful year with the Yankees. But again, as a buy low guy, perhaps. The other guy who we mentioned on other podcasts that I like is Marcus Stroman, who could also be another buy low candidate. I think he's worn out as well from someone in Toronto. But again, would either one of those guys really help the 2018 Brewers? I don't know. Stroman's battled injury this year. Neither one has pitched well this year. So it's really, just you're essentially saying maybe this year they could help, but we're going to bank on these guys being able to help in future seasons as well. So they might be worth more to the Brewers. And that would also fit in with Stearns' philosophy about rentals. But again, I don't know. If we're really just trying to upgrade the rotation for this year, I don't see many options out there, and that's part of the problem as well. It's not like other years where at the deadline you've got a ton of top quality starting pitchers that are available. It's few and far between, and I don't think that there are necessarily a ton of difference makers available on the market this deadline.
And actually, one thing you said really made me wonder, with the crunch that we're going to have with the 40-man, is Stearns almost more likely to make a trade or even maybe multiple trades before the deadline to help alleviate some of that crunch of the 40-man roster? I mean, in theory, a lot of the guys that we're looking at are secondary, they're they're not top tier, a lot of the people we've mentioned. So if you're going to get like a guy in the second tier, you don't have to necessarily give up, a Brinson or a Huera to be able to acquire him. So I don't know. I think I'm actually starting to think just from that point alone for you that this might be a little more active trade market for the Brewers than I originally thought.
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of leading as well, only because of that roster crunch. And, so you essentially have the scenario that we're going to either lose them for nothing or we can put them towards something. And if that something is a non-rental, great. If it's a rental, well, so be it, because, either way we're going to lose these guys. And I think then it depends on what type of rental we're getting back. I think Stearns will be creative in looking at that. And I know that others have criticized Stearns' deadline approach last year as essentially being inactive. I don't agree with that phraseology. I don't think that he was inactive. I think that he went out and made moves that were not what fans wanted, but which were going to fill some needs on a team that probably was not destined to make the postseason anyways. And quite frankly, Neil Walker and Anthony Schwarzak performed brilliantly last year in the second half. And Jeremy Jeffers has been a key component not only for the rest of the second half of last year, but for this season as well. So Stearns, I have put more trust in him. I think that he's proven that he is going to make smart and savvy moves, that he understands kind of where the Brewers are at as a franchise and what would be acceptable to do as a short-term solution, what would be more of a long-term move. And I think that he's going to, again, take into account all these 40-man roster decisions that are going to have to be made this winter either way. So I could see the Brewers being somewhat like last season and picking up a couple guys that might be rentals that are not expensive, like the Walkers and Schwarzaks of the world, or getting guys that can help us in the next couple of years but aren't going to cost a ton, guys like Jeremy Jeffers. And I'd be okay with that, quite frankly. And I know that last year we had some guys who really wanted Sonny Gray and they wanted Quintana, and neither one of them has actually pitched that well, since the deadline last year. And we were able to fill some of those innings internally just as good, if not better, than the numbers that the guys that were traded for put up. So I think the Brewers will be active but intelligently active, I guess is my point.
I'm starting to think that right now, Stearns is probably of the philosophy that there's maybe 5 players in all of the majors that are worth $20 million a year, and there's a lot of them getting these contracts. And when you're a small market, you just can't. No, put all your eggs in one basket like that.
Yeah, exactly, Scott. And I don't think that Cole Hamels fits on that guys that are worth $20 million list that David Stearns has in his head. So I know that there's the argument to be made that you can, pay less for certain guys than, for instance, Jesus Aguilar is not going to make a ton of money, whereas he would if he was on the open market, and then you can afford a guy like Hamels. But why, when you can fill that internally or with a cheaper option? I don't think it's just being cheap. I just think it's being smart. So we know a couple things about David Stearns at this point, and I think he's going to come through for us at the deadline with something that is smart and will hopefully help this team both this year and in the years to come. Or at least if not helping in years to come via the direct trades, at least not crippling us in the years to come with bad financial decisions. And I think that that's a fine line that we have to walk. And that, as fans, a lot of people are not that patient with. We know that we love him dearly, but we know that Craig is going to be upset on July 31st. It just happens every year. So we know that that's going to happen. And there will be a lot of fans, very smart fans, who think that the Brewers probably will not be getting anyone that can make a difference, or that Stearns missed the vote on a certain trade. And they might be right. But my point being is that I think that if you're David Stearns, you really have to take the long view with some of this stuff. It's not saying to be inactive at the deadline. It's just saying, again, to get rentals that'll be smart rentals that will not cripple us for years to come, or to get guys that can contribute to more than just this season.
Hey, let's answer Vikram's other question, as long as we're talking about acquiring aces and whatnot. Is Jimmy Nelson going to help the 2018 Brewers? And if he makes it back, is he going to pitch like the 2017 Jimmy Nelson or the 2016 and prior?
Yeah, boy, I wish I could give better news on that. I think the answer is no. And the reason I say that is because, last year when this injury originally occurred, the timetable for Jimmy Nelson was pegged at May. May being likely, June being highly probable, and July being worst case scenario. And we're now at the end of July almost, and we still haven't even heard a recent update about Jimmy Nelson thrown off the mound. And in fact, the last update was that he had a slight setback. And I don't think that the Brewers are going to risk Jimmy Nelson coming back early and then re-injuring himself just to make a couple spot starts here and to try to fit in the rotation this year. I think that the Brewers are confident enough in their depth to get through without Jimmy Nelson, and we've done it so far this year. So why not try to continue? It's either that or you risk Jimmy Nelson having a further injury. I do think that there's something that's more wrong than what the Brewers are telling the public about Nelson, which is the other reason I'm hesitant. And if that wasn't the case, we would have, number one, heard more, and number two, there'd be some explanation as to why these regional timetables were all wrong, even on the very pessimistic side. So that's my unfortunate take on Nelson. Maybe he'll get a couple spot starts in September. I don't know. But I'd be very surprised if he becomes a contributing member to the Brewers this year. And I hope I'm wrong about it, but I don't think I am.
Yeah, I know a couple weeks ago it was being reported that he was definitely not going to make it back until September at the earliest. So you're talking about the last month of the year. I think that Jimmy Nelson is, unfortunately, he's the kind of pitcher that he needs to be able to ramp up his fastball to be able to get a lot of those swings and misses and be effective. I think everything pretty much works off a fastball, like most pitchers. Yep. And he hasn't thrown off a mound now in almost a year, I guess. So
right.
He's not going to have the arm strength to be able to do that. So if you're talking about, hey, Jimmy Nelson's going to come back, he's going to be throwing 92 at first, don't bother. Just, what? Yeah. Take your time, shelve him.
Yep. And thinking about this logically instead of emotionally, I think that, it'd be great to see him out there just for his sake. But one of two scenarios is going to exist with the Brewers in September. Either we're going to be in it and we're going to be contending, and you want a pitcher that's not at full strength out on the mound. If I'm Craig Counsell, the answer is absolutely not. Or number two, the Brewers are going to fade in the second half, and we're going to be essentially out of it come September. Do you want to risk Jimmy Nelson, who was our ace pitcher in 2017, re-injuring his arm in a meaningless game in September, and then jeopardizing his 2019 season? The answer is absolutely not. So for me, there's a no-win scenario taking place here with Nelson, that no matter what the Brewers are doing on the field, that we simply can't really afford to give Nelson many opportunities out there. So I guess I could see him perhaps. We're kind of in it in September, kind of not. If he's deemed fully healthy to go out there. But again, I just think that the Brewers are a little risk averse, and really the risk reward on this one is not very high. And I think that it's probably in the Brewers' best interest to continue on with his rehab, shut him down, and have him hopefully back and healthy and a very strong contributing member to our 2019 starting rotation.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, if you want to try to, say hold out hope in any way, I don't know if he showed enough in bullpen sessions, because you can't even send him into the minors, because if he's not ready to pitch, minor league season ends pretty much at the end of August anyway.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to do that. So he's not you could do a little simulated games and stuff like that, which isn't the same, but you could try it and see if he can get his arm strength up and if everything feels okay and whatever. But if that happens, I think best case scenario, there's no way that he's a part of the rotation. There's no way that you're going to build him up and get him stretched out. Like, there's no way.
So
best case
maybe
scenario,
throw a couple of bullpen innings. Yeah, throw a couple of bullpen innings. I could see that perhaps, and it might be healthy for Jimmy Nelson's psyche to go out there and throw a couple of innings this year just so it's not a completely wasted year. And I could see that, especially if the Brewers are kind of hanging around the race, but not really, and it's September and we're maybe a couple games back from wild card. So there's really no harm in throwing him out there just to see how he does and whatever. But, I just don't think it's likely he's going to be, like you said, to be able to build up enough innings in the starting rotation. He's asking a lot of a guy at this point in the season. And, people forget it seems like a long season, but in reality it's not. And when a guy's out with a significant injury for any portion of the season, to have him coming back by, a certain point and being a successful athlete again, it's not the easiest task. And I think that the Brewers are seeing that this year with Jimmy, unfortunately.
Yeah, very unfortunate. I really hope that, he was going to be what we really needed. I mean, if you think about it, we thought, he was going to be back by the All-Star break at the latest, and turn things around. And
we thought originally, I remember when we did our first podcast for the 2018 season on opening day, and the thought was that if the Brewers rotation can just sort of band-aid it through the first month of the year, we'll have Jimmy back and pitching with us in May, and then it became Memorial Day, and then it became 4th of July, and then it became the All-Star break, and none of these things have happened. So I think that, at this point in the year, you just have to kind of cut our losses and say, we love you, Jimmy, but we're not counting on you for 2018. Get back healthy for us next year.
Yeah, and you know what? That gives me a great idea. We should probably, every time we do something like this, we're going to throw out one of those polls that just says, hey, what do you guys think? Since you're all listening and you want to, give your take. So what will Jimmy Nelson pitch in 2018? We're going to find out. So
dynamic segue, Scotty.
On Twitter.
Have your intern, Letitia, throw that up on Twitter for us, and let's do that tonight. That is a good segue. So, Brewer fans, if you're listening to this podcast, remember you can always follow us on Twitter at Brew Crew Review 1, the number 1 on Twitter, and send us your email questions. And thank you again, Vikram Paragankar from Waukesha, for emailing us a couple questions here for this show. We can't get to all of them today from the rest of you, but we will try during our next podcast. So continue to send in your emails to Brew Crew Review Podcast with an S at gmail.com. That's Brew Crew Review Podcast with an S at gmail.com. Scott, I think that now is the time in our show where we need to transition. Let's do our Rapid 9, and Craig, you can cue that music. For Rapid 9, I've got some questions here, which I guess it's just for the two of us, but let's take a swing. All right, is that music done playing? All right, there it is. All right, Scott, are you ready for this?
I guess I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
All right, the first inning, and you are leading off and hitting cleanup and ninth this game.
Oh, wow.
So, yep. All right, first inning. I think it is fairly well agreed upon by Brewer fans that the best three position players in Brewers franchise history are some combination of Robin Young, Paul Molitor, and Ryan Braun. We had a Twitter question posed to us today. Is Cecil Cooper the fourth best position player in Milwaukee Brewers history, Scott?
If you're talking about just their Brewer career, I'm gonna say,
yeah, let's throw that out there. Yeah, just Brewers career. Yeah, just their time in a Brewers uniform.
Okay, I'm gonna say yes then. Otherwise, I would have probably gone with either Raleigh Fingers or Ted Simmons. But yeah, no, I'm gonna.
Raleigh Fingers.
With Cooper.
Raleigh Fingers isn't a position player, but yeah.
What's the position player?
Yeah, well,
it's a trick question.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I meant Don Money.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say yes as well. As a Brewer, I think that certainly Ted Simmons, who you mentioned, and I would even say Gary
Oh,
with his 509 career home runs.
Yeah.
you could definitely make an argument they were the best position players in terms of a career.
Why is it that every time people bring up Gary Sheffield, you get the same feeling as when someone brings up like, an ex-girlfriend of a breakup that didn't go very well?
I was just about to use that scenario. It reminds me of it reminds me of that.
Hey, remember her? She dumped you, started dating a doctor. Shut up.
Sounds the story of my life. All right, let's go to our second inning. Scott, name the top 3 starters, and again, only in a Brewers uniform. Top 3 starters in Brewers history.
What? I'm not prepared for that kind of
starting pitchers.
Research.
Scott, we had a pre-production meeting.
I don't remember this question.
Your intern briefed you on this topic, and you discussed this at length with our anonymous source, Tom Carter.
Oh boy.
You remember what Tom said? Our anonymous source, Tom Carter.
And now, that's right, Tom. Oh, wait, hang on. Tom doesn't want us to. Tom Carter. He doesn't want us saying his name. If we're going to use him as an anonymous source, like we can use the name Tom Carter as long as we're just talking about like, hey, I had a beer with Tom Carter the other day. That's awesome.
Okay.
But like if we say I have inside information from Tom Carter, then at that point he doesn't really want us using his name. So it's.
What if we said I've got inside information from our anonymous source Tom Carter, but we don't reveal that he works for the Brewers ticket office?
Nope, it's no good. He doesn't want that because I think people are going to put 2 and 2 together.
So let's say, all right. So we'll say our anonymous source T. Carter or Tom C, but not Tom Carter.
I mean, ideally, yeah, that would be nice. I mean, I don't know. I don't. At this point, I think he's happy with just about anything as long as, even Tom C or T. Carter. But I'm just afraid that he's just going to be like, anonymous source, don't even say TC. Just say anonymous source and leave it at that. But,
Okay.
I always thought they always want people to name their sources, so that's what we do.
Yeah, well,
no matter how anonymous they are.
With journalists like our colleague Tom Hagecourt, he is probably naming his sources, so who knows? Whatever. You win some, you'll lose some. But sorry, Tom. Scotty, who are your top 3 starters in Brewers history?
Okay. All right. I can do this. Now we're talking about, again, just in a Brewer uniform. So,
yes, Scott.
Sabathia, you don't count, unfortunately, because you were phenomenal for 3 months, but
not enough. And I forgot to tell you on the Rapid 9, take as much time as you need to just to explain your answers and get into detail. It's fine.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go with wait, did you say starters or pitchers?
Starters, Scott.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
All right, Teddy Higuera, who I saw opening day at Miller Park, day of the first game at Miller Park.
Yep.
That was phenomenal. And Ben Sheets has got to be up there.
Yep.
On our Mount Rushmore -1. Oh, and then things get a little bit weird. Mostly due to longevity. I'm going to say Chris Bosio.
All right. You were right on 2 of the 3. The third answer is actually Mike Caldwell.
That's a good answer. All right, I can do that.
Okay. All right, let's confuse you again. Third inning. And we will say top 3 Brewers relievers.
Oh, man. This is so much work. I have to think off the top of my head. I'm always afraid that I'm going to forget one.
Scott, this is why West Dallas and the state of Wisconsin so value your input and your insight into Brewers baseball.
Okay, so I don't think Riley Fingers is here long enough, despite all the great things that he did. I don't think Trevor Hoffman's here long enough. I don't know, though.
Is that your answer?
No, there's not a lot of pitchers that, unfortunately, last a really long time here. Can I say Bill Wegman? He was a reliever for half his career here. wasn't he?
Okay. Yeah, a couple of years.
Okay.
I think we've got 4 minutes left on the taping, so just so you're aware.
All right. I got to go with Dan Plesac.
Yep. Agreed.
And I'm going to go with Bill Wegman. Yeah, I know it's like kind of a half answer.
Okay.
And I don't know. Boy.
Anyone, Scott, besides Jeff Bennett.
Okay. John Axford? No, I can't do that. I don't know. Was
All right.
Jim Slayton? I don't know. Was he?
Oh, that's a good. No, that's a good one actually. That's a good one. I'm gonna go with Plesac, Fingers, and Bob Wickman.
All right.
All
Slayton was mostly starting, so that's not.
Yeah, he did both. Well, all right. Fourth inning. Your favorite ticket office moment?
Oh man. There's so many great moments. I mean, Chad in the fourth floor bathroom. The employee bathroom had some issues as well. Boy, it could be someone named Jimmy giving out sweet tickets at random.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna dedicate a whole Rapid 9 to this at some point. Yeah,
that'd be amazing.
All right, that's a good one. I'm gonna go with Whistling George, Jimmy being hit by the rubber band. I'm gonna go with Chad throwing his shoes at Nancy or into Nancy's office, and also his socks.
That was easily the best. That was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, he threw them at Mary, but it missed, and it flew over Mary's head, and our co-host Chad threw his shoes essentially at our boss. So that happened.
Oh,
and then he had to
Vince, I wanted to let you know. I'm sorry. I just stepped all over your story. I apologize.
That's all right. No, you're good.
We have like a ton of time, so don't even worry about it. Like, just go.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know why, but we have a ton of time.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So, boy, Christmas, singing Christmas carols to Jimmy, that was pretty awesome. Killing flies the first year, we had a real fly problem.
Yeah, we did, and that was only alleviated through the use of rubber bands, which was essential.
And I thought you did a great job, but then people got mad because the fly carcasses were getting stuck on the ceiling, and they thought that was gross, but I don't know. They also thought that fly paper was gross, so I don't know what you could really do with that.
Yeah, people are weird.
What about that Gems game or whatever was that Diane used to always play? That's a great moment.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of good moments in that office. I recall several times where we did not go back to work and just instead stayed at a local eatery.
You mean a bar? That's
oh yeah. And then there was also the time where Chad's car accidentally got into a car show. That was my classic car show.
That was phenomenal.
that was one of my personal favorites as well.
Old Chevy Cavalier. He popped the hood, cleared out some of the dead leaves. That was amazing.
Well, we will go back to that at some point.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if I ever told you guys this one. This is, I guess, a Miller Park moment. I was leaving for the night, and I was the last one out of the ticket office, and I saw a semi roll over.
No, that's not funny. That's not nearly as funny as the other one, Scott.
I know, but it was weird because you know how the little road around the stadium had like a little bit of a curve, and for some reason the semi driver he did the little curve and it shook the load and it rolled it onto its side, and I didn't know what to do. This was like just when cell phones were like kind of brand new, I guess, but I did have my phone on me, and I sprinted down there. And another couple got there just as I did, and they were already on the phone calling 911. And the guy, his semi-cab was filled with smoke, and he just crawled out and kind of sort of sat on the hood or whatever, or the door or whatever, because it was on its side, and he was just a little bit in shock, but he was fine. He was just oh man, he was worried he was gonna get in trouble. But then I was like, okay, well,
At least you survived. That's good.
So I just sort of left. And I was like, oh, looks like we got this under control.
Well, that's good that he survived. All right. Fifth inning. Was this Bruce or Brent Suter's last start of 2018 today? He left with this past week when he left with a forearm injury.
I'm going to say yes. They gave him time on the DL. It did not, apparently, it wasn't long enough, apparently. And he hasn't been pitching very well anyway. Part of me really hopes that this is going to, kind of open the door for, Brinson or something like that. But we have so many pitchers that are injured. Zach Davies is still hurt. Nelson's, like we said, probably not coming back. So
Junior Guerra's just getting back. I mean,
Freddie Peralta's just getting back.
Yeah, it's a really injury-torn-up rotation right now. I tend to agree with you. I think that when he does come back, which may not be for a while, it sounds like, I think that he's going to go back to the bullpen, which is probably his best role. And I think that he's durable enough to do that. So I think that that's the role that best suits him. And he was only in the starting rotation as an emergency because – All right, sixth inning. Will the Brewers change their deadline plans with this past several weeks' worth of slumping play? Could you even see the Brewers becoming sellers, Scott?
I don't see us becoming sellers, but and not only, I guess, because when you think about it, is there anyone that we're going to lose at the end of this year? I mean, if there was, I could see us making a trade for controllable talent, but not anything that would I just don't see there's no real scenario where that happens, I think.
I would say I agree unless we could somehow swing a trade with Santana involved. But yeah, I think that as of the guys that are playing every day in the big leagues, that you're absolutely spot on. It would really be a kick to the fan base to start selling off assets at this point. You can't make decisions based on that, but still, it would be highly controversial or highly unusual to go from almost getting Manny Machado to selling 2 weeks later.
Having said that, though, I mean, I don't think we're all in, that's for sure. I don't know that we ever were, but the fact that we even made an offer on Machado means that we were sort of all in, and I don't think that's going to happen now.
Yep, fair enough. I don't know that Stearns likes that term, but, I see your point.
I'm not sure any Brewer fan likes that term at this point.
I mean, I'll be all in term, but yeah.
We're going for it.
Exactly. To that point, seventh inning, will David Stearns see this rebuild through? There were some rumors that he was perhaps being considered for the soon-to-be vacant general manager's job with the New York Mets. Sandy Alderson is unfortunately dealing and battling cancer again and will likely have to resign his position following the year. It's currently being, I think, three guys are kind of running the front office for the Mets in the interim. Could you see David Stearns leaving before the rebuild is truly through? And by the end of the rebuild, I mean a playoff appearance for the Brewers.
I'm going to answer this question with my heart and say that he's going to see this thing through. But my head says, even though the Mets aren't a storied franchise, the Mets are in New York, and the Mets have a lot of pieces of a championship caliber team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason other than a lot of injuries why they shouldn't have a top 5 rotation. And
yeah. We should also point out, too, really quick, too, this guy, sorry to interrupt, but David Stearns grew up as a Mets fan. So, I mean, if you were the GM, were you the GM, if you were the GM of, pick a random team, like if you were the GM of the Colorado Rockies and the Brewers called you and had a GM opening and wanted to talk to you, I mean, wouldn't you consider it?
Yeah, it's like saying a couple of years ago when the Dodgers were for sale. Is there any way that, Antanasio, if he could have just snapped his fingers and thrown up a bunch of money and switched out franchises and said, hey, I own the Dodgers now, you don't think he would have done it? So
right. Yeah. So to answer that question, I mean, my answer on this is that is it likely that the Brewers, David Stearns will see the rebuild through? I'd say yes. Is it impossible that he leaves and bolts for another opportunity? No, I don't think it is. And I think it's especially true if it's an opportunity with a team like the Mets who have not only, are in his hometown, but they're the team that he grew up rooting for and have a ton of money and could pay him more money, and who could also afford more players on free agency and other avenues that the Brewers probably can compete with in our market. So
yeah, I wouldn't blame them either. Yeah. I mean,
I wouldn't either. No, everybody has the right to better their situation. So, okay, eighth inning. Will fans in Wisconsin start to tune out the Brewers in lieu of the Packers if this losing continues? Let's say in 2 weeks from now, if the Brewers have another rough couple of weeks, only win a game or a couple games, continue to lose series, will the Brewers lose fans of the Packers?
I mean, if they drop all the way down to 500 or something like that, I think that they definitely will. But I want to say that I don't consider the Brewers and Packers or Brewers and Badgers or Badgers and Packers and whatever. I don't really consider them in competition with each other. Like, I think as a sports fan, I can casually follow all three of those teams without any kind of a problem. So if you're asking me like, hey, on a Sunday, people are probably going to spend a little bit more time listening to the Packers, and 6 days a week they're still going to be listening to the Brewers. So I don't think it's a big issue. I don't think they lose many fans.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that there is a bit of a divide. Overall, I agree with you. I think that I can speak for myself on this at least. I am by far and away, Brewers fan number one, and nothing else really comes close. That being said, of course, I root for the Packers and I cheer for the Packers and I watch the Packers. Typically on a Sunday in the fall, say in September when the Brewers are still playing, I'm actually still going to be watching the Brewers instead of the Packers, and that's just because of my primary love for the Brewers and for baseball. But I'll always watch the Packers if they're not playing at the same time, and I'll certainly watch the Packers and root for them in October and November and December. So yeah, I don't think there is you have to make these decisions too often. Really, the teams don't come up against each other on the schedule more than a handful of times, and it really isn't that big of a deal. I do think that you see a little overkill with Packers media on WTMJ, the Brewers flagship station, and other media entities in Wisconsin, but I suppose that's to be expected until the Brewers can win some World Series, or until fans start to say a little bit more about it. But that being said, overall, I agree with you. I don't think it's a huge problem to cheer for both teams and to be avidly following both teams. So let's hope it's not an issue and the Brewers continue to win.
And isn't it pretty easy to follow the Packers? I mean, one game a week, 3 hours. That's all it takes. Maybe check an injury report a couple days later. That's about it.
Yeah, and if you're a Packers fan, again, you're really only talking unless the Brewers were in the postseason, and then it'd be a different story. But if the Brewers and Packers are really only playing for fans' attention for 4 days, essentially a year, 4 Sundays in September, and many of those, of those 4 games, you may only have a couple that really even butt up against each other time-wise, where the Brewers might play at 1 and the Packers play, later in the afternoon or vice versa, whatever the case might be. It really isn't that hard to be able to follow both teams. So I don't see it as a huge deal either.
Let's not forget the great Badger football team this year.
Yeah, of course. Let's go with on Wisconsin. Absolutely. All right, last inning here, Scotty. Should the Brewers keep their Walk of Fame versus their Wall of Honor, combine them, make a Hall of Fame, scrap them all? What's your thoughts on the Wall of Fame versus the Walk of Honor versus the Hall of Fame idea?
I didn't even understand it. I mean, if they didn't have what they are in the name, I wouldn't even understand the difference. There's a Wall of Fame that's literally just some plaques nailed to the wall in the middle of some dimly lit corner of the stadium that I don't get. And then the Walk of Fame, nobody's ever going to look at it. Nobody's ever hey, let's go. Hey, you know what? As long as we're here, let's take a lap around the stadium and follow the Walk of Fame. No one does that. And so
Right. That's a great point. And I bring it up this week because this is the week that the Brewers are going to be honoring guys in both, and Prince Fielder is going to be on the Wall of Honor. I have to make sure I get my facts right here. He'll be on the Wall of Honor. Jeff Jenkins, Harry Dalton, and Doug Melvin will be inducted into the Walk of Fame. So
which one's better?
I think the Walk of Fame is considered to be more of an honor because there's fewer guys. It's a balloting process, whereas the wall of honor is, if you played a certain number of years for the Brewers, you're pretty much automatically on.
Jeff Jenkins.
Or if you made an all-star team, but Jenkins is on the more prestigious one, so it's kind of interesting. But
I don't understand how he gets any of that. Like, I was a huge Jeff Jenkins fan growing up, but I mean, if you just look at the numbers, like, I don't see how it pans out other than his longevity here. But having several mediocre seasons does not matter in any way to me.
Well, I think that at some point in time, it would really be in the Brewers' best interest to kind of combine things. And I know I brought it up before, but I'm really supportive of the idea of creating a Brewers Hall of Fame, essentially, at Miller Park. And you could really combine that with other cool things like the Wall of Honor or like the Bud Selig experience located on the loge level and make, a Hall of Fame that isn't necessarily just based on, you'd have your Wall of Honor to honor, very specific guys. You could have a Walk of Fame around the Hall of Fame, something like that, where more fans might see it. But, just to kind of tell the story of the team and the history of baseball in Milwaukee and make it a more inclusive thing. I think that you were on the trip that we took to Cincinnati, and the Reds have got a great Hall of Fame. The Twins have got one. There's other stadiums in baseball that really honor their franchise, and it doesn't have to just be about World Series championships. And it's not a Hall of Fame in the Cooperstown sense where you've got a plaque with a bunch of guys that were just incredibly gifted ball players. In Milwaukee, you could have that segment of it, but you'd also have, I think that there should be something done by the Brewers to teach fans that are younger about what it was to be a Brewers fan in 1992. What that team was all about, or Team Streak. There are things that you can do to connect generations in baseball that is very unlike any other sport, just because of the length of the season and sort of the hold that it has always had on the American imagination. I think that the Brewers do a better job with that than just putting some random plaques down outside of TGI Fridays of all places, and having a bunch of names in the sidewalk essentially outside the stadium where people are walking and not even looking down. So my thought would be to kind of combine everything at some point, make a Hall of Fame, really tell the story of the franchise and baseball in Milwaukee.
Let's take that second level. It's in a left field corner of the loge level, the little area for kids or whatever. You like push racing sausages around or something like that. Let's build that out. Yeah,
you could easily do it. And you could do it right by the Selig experience where that is on that second level. And right now, that whole corridor is essentially just like a big empty area outside of that. And there's hardly anybody that goes back there. And the thing with the Selig experience is that it is really well done. And it's very interesting. But once you've seen it, you've kind of seen it. I try to go once a season just because it's still fairly new. And so I've been to it 3-4 times now. And it's always interesting, but I don't think most fans, once you've been there, are going to have a need to go back. So there's really no reason to continually go to see it. But whereas with a Hall of Fame, where that was just one exhibit in it, that would be constantly changing. So each year you would kind of have a new updated section where last year's story of the 2017 Brewers would then be added to the 50 years almost of Brewers history. I just think it could be really interesting. It would really tie, again, Milwaukeeans of all ages to this team and to this franchise, and I just think it'd be really interesting. You could display old memorabilia. You could have players come back for signings there. It would just be a real cool interactive space for a Brewer fan.
Yeah, and I guess not only that, this is going to sound like total loser talk or whatever, but if you had a scenario like that where you capped off the highlights of each part of each year, I mean, there's a lot of amazing stories that happen over the course of a baseball season that go beyond the one the win-loss record. And so,
absolutely.
I mean, just to be able to talk about some of those stories and give a little brief synopsis, of the year or whatever, and all the great things that happen, that would be really cool. I mean,
it'd be great. Yeah.
Even if you did little video segments of each decade.
Yep. And the Brewers do and the Brewers, and I'm sure you've seen it, they do a temporary thing at the winter warm-up event that takes place in downtown Milwaukee at the Midwest Airlines Center or whatever it's called now. And they do, they've just got a kiosk essentially, but it's got on each side, it's got all the pictures, just the team pictures of all the teams in Brewers history. And then they've got a TV that shows highlights from opening day in 1999 or, just some random games. I think that that's really the experience that baseball fans crave. Outside of winning a world championship, the beauty of baseball is that it's daily. For 6-7 months of the year, you have a daily interaction with your team. And it kind of encapsulates the highs and the lows of a long season. And I think that daily kind of just steadiness of baseball is what's beautiful about the game. And to be able to kind of put that into a Hall of Fame and have that be a permanent thing, I think would just be awesome. I'd love to have some artifacts from County Stadium there. A lot of fans now have never even heard of or been to a game at County Stadium. It's been that many years. So I think that we really need to do something to reach that younger generation to just continue that great baseball tradition in Milwaukee.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. I also love that Cincinnati. I love how interactive it is. I mean, like all of your other stuff is there too.
That was awesome.
It was
awesome. The Cardinals do one very similar, and I had a chance, and I hate the Cardinals with a fiery passion, but I will say that going to their Hall of Fame, I went there with my dad a couple summers ago, and we had a great time just because we both love baseball, and it was really interesting. And to be able to see Bob Gibson's jersey was incredible. And I think that fans, even just not just Brewer fans that would come to Milwaukee just to visit, would love to go see something like that and be able to see Robin Yount's jersey. And right now there's no place in Miller Park where you can go do that.
Yeah, we got to do a little bit more. I mean, if we would put half as much effort into like that as we do like the racing sausages, like you would think
right.
That it would be, or Hank the dog or whatever it is. Like, and I'm not like trying to bag on those things, but they're not really doing a lot for, teaching people the history of the game or anything like that. It's just like kind of a fun thing to, grab the casual fan and hook them. And so,
right. And those are frivolities where I'm talking about something like you point out that would reach the hardcore baseball fan and more importantly, even create more hardcore baseball fans. And I think that the Brewers are always going to make some money off the casual fans because the casual fans like to, go tailgate and see who wins the sausage race. And I'm all about that stuff. Like, that's great. I don't do those things too. But, somebody like you or me who are hardcore fans, to be able to kind of go and really think back on, again, like some random team in Brewers history, I think that really draws people in. I think that that'd be a big deal for this franchise. So I'm all for it.
What about the area? Hang on, I'm trying to get my facts straight. Sort of behind home plate-ish. On the first level, like by all the corporate offices, you could build that out even. Just get rid of that entrance. There's no point. It's not behind home plate. That's
couple likely areas, and I think that you will see something done at some point if enough fans ask for it. So I'm all for it. I will be very publicly supporting this going forward. So I'm hopeful that we can raise some support on this. But in any event, probably a few years down the road.
Well, because we're going to be tour guides for this, I assume, in like 30 years.
At some point after retirement, you betcha. Well, that should do it here for today, Scott. Thanks for the great conversation. Thank you to our co-hosts, Craig and Chad, for all that you've done on this broadcast. We will be back at you next week, hopefully with some good news from the Brewers West Coast swing. I don't know, Scott, any other parting thoughts for West Dallas or Wisconsin?
There is a slight chance that we might postpone our next taping to go right up until and then record like basically right after the trade deadline so that we can get everything, get all the fresh new information right to you guys.
Well, stay on top of us on Twitter. Again, that's Brew Crew Review 1, the number 1 on Twitter. Shoot us an email, brewcrewreviewpodcast with an S at gmail.com, and you'll be sure to receive any updates as the news happens. So thanks again for listening, everybody. Let's have a good week for Brewers baseball, and remember to stay classy, Wisconsin. Go Brewers.
Go Brewers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.